So while Chris comes up. Any questions from the audience? Yes, Sarah. Yes, say who you are and then ask the question. I think you have to wait for the mic because if you didn't know, because the whole thing sold out so fast, there are lots of people who weren't able to come to the conference, so it's being filmed. So just be aware you're on the record. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Sarah Codrington, the Georgian Group.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, sorry, keep the microphone.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, what did the Duke do that got kicked out so ceremoniously?
I think wasn't he a traitor? He was a traitor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't.
So it was Jacobite revolt.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Another question. So I have two questions of James.
All for me.
Well, because it's the most recent one.
Yeah.
One is, I know that, or I think I remember that Kerry Downs thought that Vanbrugh building the bridge at Blenheim was a way of sort of
Stamping his mark.
Yes, and I've always been a bit sceptical of that. But actually, when you realise that the bridge is part of his heraldic device, you suddenly think, well, maybe there was an association.
Although the bridge in his crest is upside down.
Okay.
So I'm not sure he'd want to refer to it.
But it is a big bridge.
It is a part of his, it's part of his heritage, yes.
And the second thing I was interested in is he went to Hanover with the Earl of Halifax, but he also went with Addison. And in fact, Addison is one of these people who you can never quite figure out, or I certainly couldn't figure out what the relationship was between Vanbrugh and Addison, even in spite of the fact that they've been in Hanover together. So actually, I'm going to ask you all to answer this question, but start with James.
Oh, what, the relationship?
Yeah.
No, there's no sort of no heraldry angle I can start. Yeah, I can.
There's a theatrical angle because Addison was working on Rosamond, the opera, which then I think it was being staged possibly at Drury Lane. There was a big backdrop that at the sort of denouement.
They used Blenheim as a backdrop.
So
it's rather amazing. Yes, David.
Well, there's another connection through Cibber as well, who was in Addison's Cato, which was one of the great popular successes, a play now regarded as completely unperformable. Cibber has quite a lot to say about this in his, in the apology. Very struck by the point about heraldry and the relationship to the points I was making about Vanbragh's anonymity. There's a very odd disjunction here, isn't there, between the unwillingness to put a personal stamp on the writing and the willingness to go for personal heraldic memorials on buildings. And which does suggest, actually, that he was far more keen on projecting the image of himself as an architect than he ever was as a writer.
But also, I think that one of the reasons he might have travelled with Cibber is because they enjoyed each other's company.
Yeah,
and it would have been a long trip, and I can imagine him saying,
"Well, they were
let's go together."
Of the Kit Kat Club. I mean, I was rather struck, having read Vanbragh's correspondence a lot, and then I suddenly thought, a bit like Chris, that I should read other people's correspondence. How boring Addison's is by contrast.
It has none of the panache that Vanbrugh does have. I mean, the relationship between Vanbrugh and Addison, obviously, I think they weave in and out of each other's lives at moments, and they dine. And there's a good bit by Swift when he dines with Vanbrugh, Addison, and Steele, and then he says, I got tired of them all and went home, or something like that. So, I mean, part of that kind of slightly awkward relationship we have with Swift. But no, I mean, there aren't any letters from Addison to Vanbrugh, and there aren't any letters.
No, it feels like one of those missing bits of Vanbrugh. I mean, there are lots of missing bits. As you correctly pointed out, there's this vast chunk of his life which is not properly recorded in letters. So now you've had time to think of more questions from the floor.
Jeremy's got one.
Yes, at the back. Jeremy Mason.
Thank you all. Fascinating papers. On the point of the missing parts, to what do you attribute this lack of surviving letters? Because you make quite a dramatic point about it. And then if I could add a general question to the people from the drama experts. I'm just interested to know if you'd like to, if you have a view about Vanbrugh's architecture as people who are experts in his drama.
Yeah, good question. So I'm taking the two
drama.
So
drama.
That's tricky, isn't it?
This is partly an architectural historian, although he may not agree to that description.
Something very interesting to me about the relapse. The early printed text describes the big sort of musical set piece at the end as a mask, which makes me wonder about Vanbrugh's debt, or thinking about Inigo Jones as well, and his knowledge particularly of Jones's drawings, which it seems to me clearly translate into the kinds of images that people would have seen on the Restoration stage. So if you go through Restoration plays and look at first playwrights and the number of scenes they imagined visually, Vanbrugh comes out on top. The Relapse, as a first play, has more individual scene settings than any other first play by any writer. So that tells me he was already thinking in very visual terms as a playwright. And of course, many of those scenes feature buildings. We know disappointingly little about what the scenery for Restoration comedy particularly may have looked like. My guess has always been it must have been indebted to images that were inherited from court masks, standard images of parkland, of street scenes, and so on. So that's my bit on that. I don't know if you want to.
I should say, Annette is doing a book on the circle of people surrounding the establishment of the Queen's Theatre Haymarket.
Yes.
So it is very
looking at
particularly.
opera a lot. Yeah. Yes, I mean, architecturally, Vanbrugh was such an original, wasn't he, really? I mean, I think I was trying to get across in my paper that moment in history where it was just a flexible, people coming forward with new ideas, and then that later with the political stability kind of settled down. I think Vanbrugh's part of that very vivid period of invention. I think perhaps, though, from a theatrical point of view, I mean, we were talking about the Relapse and the Provoked Wife. I mean, this is part of a recognisable tradition in terms of the drama, isn't it? I mean, he's kind of very much looking back to that kind of rakish style of comedy, I think.
Yes, he's in many ways, for those two most famous plays of his are regressive within the period. The Relapse, very self-consciously so, but a reaction against the new sentimentalism of Love's Last Shift.
I mean, my answer to Jeremy's question would be, I thought it was very good focusing not on the Relapse and the Provoked Wife, but on the translation, because you sort of realised that Vanbrugh had a much longer engagement with the theatre. But the sort of orthodoxy is he wrote two plays and then he turned to architecture, whereas actually you demonstrated it's much longer involvement. So I think we're finished before having coffee. Chris, I know, is interested in the issue of the relationship between his theatrical writing and Castle Howard. So Chris, will you say a little bit about it?
Well, I mean, obviously the two go together. I mean, but I'm just going to quickly answer Jeremy's question about why it's so spotty, the correspondence and everything. And I think we have to kind of assign that to the hazards of history. Not everybody's fortunate enough to have a family like the Howards who never throw anything away. So for goodness, we're lucky for that, except there's a big hiatus in the 1710s and earlier with the correspondence with Carlyle. So we have what we have. I still think, given the discovery about India only 20 years ago, there might be an 18th century mail sack somewhere in a provincial kind of...
In Scotland. Yes. The Scots are good.
So you never know on that. So I've slightly dodged your question, Charles, about his theatrical writings and Castle Howard. I don't think I've got time to answer that. I mean, it's a house that obviously we know is brimming with theatrical, whatever we mean by that. But I think that theatricality importantly translates into the landscape as well, where you have, as it were, these panoramic views that as you move through it, and I think this is an important thing, that you experience the landscape on the move with things coming into view and reappearing and disappearing and so on. And so there's a kind of locomotive dynamic to it, which I think is not unsimilar to, as it were, scene changing in a theatre and things like that, that you've got multiple perspectives. So I'll stop at that point, Charles.
Okay, so we're going to break for coffees in order that we can be back sharply for the next session, because I'm conscious it's a long day. And I want to thank all the speakers very much indeed. I had that sense that actually new light is going to be cast on Vanbrugh from other disciplines. And when I was writing, I felt that actually there's been much more work in terms of literary history really than architectural history. So thank you all for very much indeed.